Hello everyone, I am Parker, continuing the lecture on expanding your imagination. One related issue arising from family bonds is the matter of family education. Let's start by discussing early childhood enlightenment education for children around the age of 2 to 3 years old. Children begin to receive family education, which is very important. We all know that when children are young, one of the things they are most willing to do is imitate their parents, and this is a crucial aspect. Of course, sometimes children also imitate their older siblings if they have any. This imitation process is the initial stage of forming their mindset, and it is highly significant. The foundation laid by a family determines the basis for a child's future mindset, problem-solving abilities, and the formation of their worldview. The formation of this mindset begins with imitation. Between the ages of 2 to 3, children engage in conscious and unconscious behaviors in this regard. Why do we say this? Some children may imitate with intent, while others may do so unconsciously. As they grow older, they might show more intention in their imitative actions. As a family, education should never be overlooked. Our initial influence on our children shapes their worldview throughout their lives. If you neglect the early impact on your child, you cannot be considered a responsible parent. It's not about reaching a certain high level or possessing specific knowledge as a parent. That is not necessary. However, you must remember that children imitate your words and actions, so at the very least, your conduct should be honest and correct. You should avoid engaging in illegal activities. Your behavior and language should be civilized and self-controlled. Refrain from using foul language, as you wouldn't want your child to learn and use it when they start speaking to you. Consider this to be a good education for your child. So we can say that the earliest stage of a child's family education begins with the parents. During this period, the child may also be influenced by grandparents or other relatives who participate in their upbringing. However, regardless of the involvement of other family members, the child's imitation of the behaviors of their parents is inevitable. Rarely in this world do we find children completely separated from their parents. Even if grandparents or other relatives help, it doesn't mean the child is entirely free from the guidance or influence of their parents. Thus, the foundation of early family education starts right here. In other words, a child's real starting line is set from this point. As parents, what kind of starting point do you provide for your children? This is your responsibility, so don't complain about the child's progress. It all starts from the beginning. If you didn't take this matter seriously from the start and failed to give them a good starting point, how can they move forward with confidence? Regardless of the type of family, whether wealthy, middle class, or poor, the principle remains the same. This is the natural law of parenting. When a child reaches the so-called understanding phase, starts to speak and learns to communicate, that's when they begin to imitate your behavior and language. They might even engage in seemingly meaningless actions and more. At this stage, you need to provide them with a positive example and guidance to effectively teach them what is right and wrong, and even instill certain moral values. If you fail to do so, to be honest, it's a failure on your part. Don't dismiss these matters as trivial. They can significantly impact the child's entire life. Many times in our lives, we are faced with numerous inevitable choices. However, no matter how many frustrations we encounter or how much we may not understand or achieve in the external world, that is not what's frightening. What truly matters is ourselves, whether we can leave a positive example and cultivate good character for the next generation, for our children. This is the most significant purpose of our lives. In everyone's life, besides striving for themselves, they also need to procreate and make efforts for their family and even for their future generations. If you abandon these responsibilities and are unwilling to make these efforts, letting things take their natural course, then honestly, you will end up back in poverty with no difference from families in impoverished areas. In impoverished families, there is hardly any positive example. The behaviors of some parents in those families, such as laziness, alcoholism, and uncivilized language, all have the worst influence on their offspring. Don't they realize it? They do, but let me tell you, these parents are pretending not to understand while knowing the truth deep down. A normal adult, regardless of the poverty level in their area, should be able to accept certain objective moral and ethical principles propagated by society. The problem lies in the fact that these individuals do not consider these morals and ethics as principles that all humans should abide by. Instead, they adhere to their habitual eyes of thinking, believing they can act as they please without anyone's guidance, as if they are the rulers of the world. This approach is meaningless if you choose not to adhere to or consciously ignore his moral and legal norms. Then these issues are your problems, your family as problems. As a result, how can your family and your future generations thrive? The principles are all the same, but no one thinks about them, no one talks about them, and no one pays attention to them. This is the pitiful aspect of our human nature, isn't it? How to fully understand this kind of education or enlightenment education as young parents, let me give you a piece of advice. You are the role models for your children and they will imitate you, so think about it. Think about what you should do. Think about your behavior, language and thoughts. If you cannot provide a positive influence on your children, then what right do you have to expect them to achieve anything in the future? Here I haven't delved into the issue of filial piety much because I plan to address it later. However, from this point onwards, the topic of filial piety emerges. Remember, filial piety stems from family affection. Why should children be filial to you? It's based on family affection. So, as parents, if you want your children to be filial, the prerequisite is having a correct and healthy family relationship. If you view family affection as a means to force your children into so-called filial piety, to put it frankly, your future life will be miserable. Why? Because your children will eventually realize these issues sooner or later. They will understand and might even break free from you because of it. They are no longer filial to you because you are using family affection as a tool to manipulate them. You haven't treated family affection as genuine affection. Instead, you have turned it into a moral manipulation tool in the hands of parents. Many families in this world are like this. They use so-called family affection to manipulate their children's behavior and lives. I understand that there may be opposing views, but this phenomenon and fact do exist, and I can tell you that it's not a minority occurrence. So we must not treat family affection as a manipulative tool. This is also the main theme of this discussion. Family affection cannot be exploited. It is pure and noble, the most sublime emotion in humanity. If you manipulate family affection, if you use it to manipulate morality, I'm sorry, but I must say without reservation, you do not belong to humanity. All right, perhaps I expressed it with some intensity, but I believe I spoke the truth. I leave it to you to understand. All right, earlier I discussed many issues related to the mindset and emotions surrounding family relationships. Similarly, another problem arises within family relationships, and this should be attributed to the foundation of family upbringing. Sure, let's divide it into two parts. The first part will focus on families with relatively stable lives and incomes. The second part will address families living in poverty. In the first part, let's talk about families with relatively stable incomes, or those who are slightly more affluent. They tend to encourage their children starting from around the age of 3 to imitate adults. This imitation includes teaching them how to do certain things and how to speak, among other things. It all begins with manners and how to address elders, and from there this kind of family education emphasizes the most basic and primitive forms of politeness and language which are instilled in the child. This approach is not entirely wrong, as it is natural for parents to teach their children behavioral norms. However, the extent of teaching should be considered. You cannot expect a child to fully embody the behaviors of an adult because children have their natural ways of expressing themselves. It might not be appropriate to expect a child to behave exactly like an adult at such a young age. The ideal behavior for a child should be age appropriate and considerate of their emotional and developmental needs. It is indeed very unfortunate that many parents fail to realize this. So in this chapter I want to address another theme. Do not let children engage in activities or behaviors beyond their age. This includes both activities and behaviors. What does this mean? First, in terms of activities, there are many things that children should not be asked to do because their thinking and understanding are not fully developed, and their minds are still relatively simple. Children have their natural tendencies, and you should not suppress these natural tendencies by forcing them to do things beyond their age. Let's take an example of education. Many parents may encourage their children to learn arts, painting, piano, music, and so on, but what level of proficiency can they achieve? It depends on their interests and the right guidance. Without these two foundations, expecting your child to become a prodigy overnight is simply not realistic. So when parents demand that their children do things beyond their their age, it can have many negative effects on them. The second point is about behavior. A child's behavior should reflect their innocence and their most primitive nature. However, many parents insist on teaching their children complex language and behavior that are more appropriate for adults. This is excessive because it does not belong to the child's natural state. What is your purpose in educating your child this way? A child has a nature which is primitive. If you try to suppress their nature, will the child still have a happy childhood? As parents, you do not have the right to stifle their joyous childhood. The second part pertains to families in relatively impoverished areas where these issues don't exist. To be honest, why is that? It's because these poor families have simple expectations for their children. As long as they can understand and speak, they are encouraged to work hard for survival and strive for a better life. Of course, some families may not require young children to work, so they let the children roam freely unsupervised and unconcerned. The children's playmates are their neighbors' kids or others with similar interests, and their days are spent without any specific purpose. In such families, there is little influence on the language and behavior of the children because they are exposed to influences outside their homes, predominantly negative and uncivilized language and behavior. These children, being affected by such influences, may end up imitating these negative traits, appearing ignorant and unrefined as a result. So when it comes to the topic of educational enlightenment for children, every family in the world is different, and the methods and approaches followed vary as well. We cannot judge what is right or wrong because the family as survival environment and conditions are diverse. Can we expect them to change? No. It's not feasible. Take for example the children in impoverished areas. How can we demand educational enlightenment from them? Their parents often have a deeply ingrained poverty mindset and may not be willing to provide positive influences for their children. Will educating them be effective? All charitable organizations should understand the truth in this world. All impoverished families share a common phenomenon. No matter how poor they are resistant to change. The reasons behind the formation of such a mindset remain unknown, which often leaves me unsure of what to say to these charitable organizations. What meaning does it have to help them in this way? Is it effective? Can it solve the root problem? Unfortunately, it cannot. Even if many countries, societies, or charitable institutions donate to build schools hoping to provide children with a good education to lift them out of poverty, where is family education? Can a school replace the role of family and its education? The role of family and the bonds of affection cannot be replaced, and that's where the real foundation for a child's development lies. So do your methods work? Let's wait and see. I don't want to conclude that they are ineffective, but I think they might be. Look at all the charitable organizations and individuals who have helped impoverished areas so far. How many of them have been successful? How many have been able to nurture genuine talents? It seems unrealistic. The reason is that the fundamental things haven't changed. What are these fundamental things for a child? It's education, both from society and from the family. While they might have received education from society, they may lack proper family education, leading to imbalances and incorrect perspectives in life. Of course, saying this might cause dissatisfaction among many people, but it doesn't matter. Let the facts answer this. Is it true or not? After all the talking, the main point I want to make is this: the education of children, their enlightenment education, including both societal education and family education. Family education is extremely crucial because before children receive societal education, they are first influenced by their family as education. I believe everyone understands this principle, right? Family education entirely depends on the ideology, mindset, and other factors of the parents themselves. However, we truly cannot expect all parents in the world to have a clear and rational understanding of this issue. That is the most tragic aspect of humanity. Of course, if we can consciously change all of this, if the parents who are listening to this lecture, especially the young parents, can seriously think about it and consciously elevate and systematize this enlightenment education, even perfect it, then I believe that the future of your children will not go astray, and at the very least their values will be correct. Therefore, this lecture does not aim to persuade others. It entirely depends on each individual. If you do not want to change, I can say it 100 times, but it won't make a difference. If you truly want to change, you already know how to do it. All of you are adults with normal thinking abilities and you understand how to act. Speaking bluntly, as adults, don't you truly understand the moral issues, environmental issues and cultural issues that shape our human society? I don't believe you don't understand. It's just pretending to be clueless while trying to conceal your flaws and shortcomings. You should be well aware of which behaviors are wrong and which should not occur. At least there are some common civilized morals that humanity should possess, right? You know these things. So the most frightening thing is not the children or their environment, it's the deep-rooted issues, flaws and bad traits of your parents. It's the vulgarity, mediocrity and deficiencies that you carry. If you don't change, you will harm your children's entire life. This is not a problem of societal education, it's a problem of family education. This statement might sound a bit harsh, but it is the truth. Think about it seriously. You always emphasize the importance of children not losing at the starting line, but what kind of starting line have you provided for them? What kind of starting point have you given them? Shouldn't you engage in self-reflection? Our discussion has now entered the stage of focusing on educational topics, particularly emphasizing enlightening and family education. The reason why family education is placed first is that before children receive social education, they are primarily influenced by their family during their early years. The formative years before a child enters school, especially primary education, are crucial in shaping their mindset, and this influence largely comes from the family. Therefore, can we all prioritize the importance of family education not only for the psyche of our children and future generations, but also for our own future lives? Can we reflect on ourselves and make genuine efforts to improve? Whether you choose to embrace these ideas or not is subjective and may vary from person to person. I cannot explain it further here. And whether you can accept these perspectives or not, these facts exist. Many young parents are willing to choose what they consider to be a good kindergarten for their children around the age of 3. This mentality is not necessarily wrong. But the problem lies in the fact that even in a good kindergarten, the early education provided to children often revolves around basic arithmetic or simple language skills. It is difficult to determine how much impact this education will have on a child's future. The reason is that regardless of the kindergarten a child attends, they will ultimately return to their family environment where they will have the most interactions with their parents. Therefore, placing all hopes solely on the so-called quality of the kindergarten is not entirely correct. Sometimes young parents may not realize that once their child goes to kindergarten, they start showing various changes leading to many incidents. The reason is quite simple. The child transitions from the family environment to a collective environment which can be understood as a small society. They are surrounded by many pillars, which naturally leads to communication, language exchange, and even some level of ideological exchange. This ideological exchange is mostly about showing off, sharing food, and other simple things. Of course, kindergartens also focus on developing various abilities in children, but that is mostly in theory. If you want to nurture your child from this stage, the most crucial factor is the influence of parents and the family. This kind of enlightening influence is far greater than what the kindergarten can provide, because teachers in the kindergarten have to manage many children and it's impossible for them to individually enlighten or influence each child. So these children are primarily influenced by their families. However, the biggest issue arises when children start interacting with other kids because they develop a sense of comparison. They begin comparing their appearance, the food they eat, the snacks they have, and even the parents of other children as they grow older. Around 4 or 5 years of age, their expressions become more complete and the sense of comparison becomes stronger during this period. Young parents often encounter many challenges. Some children, for example, may demand things from their elders, and all sorts of conflicts can arise during this time. As parents, we should be very aware of one thing: when our children undergo these changes, it is not a bad thing. What does it indicate? It shows that our children are developing thoughts and starting to contemplate things. The key to addressing these issues lies in how we as parents can guide our children to have a healthy mindset and encourage them to think about these these matters. Here I particularly emphasize the word guide instead of impose or indoctrinate. You should use reasoning to lead them because a child's mindset has been formed. As an adult, can't you change it? If you can't even change your child, then I don't know what to say to you. Therefore, when children are in kindergarten, there will be many contradictions and issues. However, you need to be aware and clear about one thing: this is a sign of progress for the child. It does not mean that your child is becoming bad. Even if some children ask inappropriate questions or show curiosity about certain things, it is a manifestation of their maturity and advancement. If at this stage you understand your child as if they were an adult and perceive them as having gone astray, then it is your thinking that is incorrect, not the children. The problem lies with you as parents. Your worldview seems to be greatly flawed. More importantly, after children start going to kindergarten, a very significant issue arises: lying. Alright, we'll discuss the issue of children lying in the next session. That's all for today. Friends who are interested in my lectures, please click to subscribe and click on the little bell. At the same time, the links to the Big Tree Thinking Model Theory ebook and the Big Tree Thinking Model and Junior High School Mathematics lectures are here below. Friends can click on the link to watch related free lectures. Thank you all.